What if the most powerful military in human history, 50,000 troops, thousands of precision bombs, AI targeting systems, and a space force operating from orbit, is still walking straight into a trap? On February 28, 2026, the United States launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran. Over 5,500 targets struck. Iranian air defenses obliterated. The supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, killed in the opening days of the campaign. By every conventional measure, it looked like an American victory. But here is what nobody on television is telling you. Every single player in this conflict, America's enemies and America's allies alike, wanted this war to happen, and most of them want America to lose it. At 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time on February 28th, American bombers, destroyers, and fighter jets simultaneously struck targets across Iran in what CENTCOM called a coordinated campaign to dismantle the Iranian regime's security apparatus. Within 72 hours, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was dead. Iranian air defenses were in ruins. The Soleimani-class warship fleet, Iran's most advanced naval assets, had been wiped off the map entirely. President Trump appeared on television and declared the operation was essentially an excursion. Clean, swift, decisive. But here is the problem. Day 27 of Operation Epic Fury arrived, and Iran was still firing daily barrages of missiles and drones. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which nearly one-third of all the world's seaborne oil passes every single day, was declared closed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They threatened to set fire to any vessel that tried to pass through. Global oil markets shuddered, Gulf states scrambled, and the Pentagon quietly drafted plans for a ground invasion. This does not look like an excursion. This looks like the opening phase of something far larger and far more dangerous. And to understand why, you need to understand who is actually playing this game. Strip away all the television talking points, and what you find is a conflict with four major players: the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, each with a completely different definition of victory. And the terrifying thing is that three of those four players benefit from American exhaustion. Start with the United States. America's stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury were straightforward: eliminate Iran's nuclear program, destroy its missile and drone capabilities, neutralize its naval forces in the Gulf, and protect American allies. Underneath all that is the deeper strategic reality. If Iran is destroyed, America keeps control of the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which global energy trade flows. Control the strait, control global commerce. It is empire maintenance dressed up as counterproliferation. Iran's objectives are almost the mirror image. Tehran wants to survive, obviously, but beyond survival, Iran has been playing a longer game, a phased, measured escalation strategy designed to maximize American costs over time. Iranian forces have been using Russian and Chinese satellite intelligence to assess bomb damage and recalibrate their daily strikes. They know they cannot win a conventional head-to-head battle against American air power, so they are not trying to. They are trying to make this war last long enough that the American people lose the will to continue. Every missile fired is not just a military act. It is a political message sent directly to the American voter. Then there's Israel. Tel Aviv has been openly coordinating with CENTCOM, providing intelligence and conducting parallel strikes. But pay attention to what Israeli strategists are actually saying behind closed doors. Israel's goal is not just to destroy Iran's nuclear program. Israel wants to permanently reshape the regional security balance, a phrase that appears directly in analyst reports from March 2026. Israel is exploiting what it sees as a temporary strategic window while America is fully committed. And every day American forces are bogged down in this campaign is another day Israel has freedom of action across Lebanon, the West Bank, Syria, and Gaza, without Washington having the bandwidth to apply diplomatic pressure. On March 26, 2026, news broke that Saudi Arabia had opened the King Fahd air base to American forces for use in strikes against Iran. On its face, that looks like a clear statement of alliance, Riyadh standing with Washington. But on the same day, Saudi Arabia was engaged in direct, high-level negotiations with Iran in a neutral venue, reportedly discussing the protection of Gulf energy infrastructure and the establishment of humanitarian corridors. Read that again. Saudi Arabia is simultaneously hosting American bombers and negotiating with the country those bombers are hitting. This is not hypocrisy, this is strategy. The Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, brokered by China in 2023, had been slowly thawing one of the Middle East's most bitter rivalries. That process is now in tatters. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister himself admitted that relations are shattered after Iranian missile attacks struck neighboring Gulf states. But Riyadh has not picked a permanent side. Saudi Arabia is hedging. It wants Iran weakened enough that the Gulf becomes safer for Saudi ambitions. It does not want Iran destroyed so completely that America emerges as the unchallenged regional master with no rival to keep it occupied elsewhere. In geopolitics, there are no permanent allies. There are only permanent interests. And Saudi Arabia's permanent interest is staying on top no matter who wins the war. On March 2, 2026, a senior advisor to Iran's Revolutionary Guard stood before cameras and said four words that shook global markets to their core. The strait is sealed. Any vessel attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, he warned, would be met with force. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Iranian Navy would ignite those vessels. This is Iran's most powerful weapon, and it has nothing to do with nuclear warheads. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical energy choke point. Nearly one-third of all seaborne oil, crude from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, all of it funnels through that narrow 21-mile-wide passage between Iran and Oman. Close it for a week, and oil prices spike. Close it for a month, and entire economies start breaking. The Washington Institute for Near East Policy published a detailed analysis noting that Iran's stated terms for any ceasefire include a new legal regime for the Strait of Hormuz, essentially demanding the right to regulate and tax traffic through waters the international community considers open passage. That is not a negotiating position. That is a demand for permanent regional leverage, and the United States cannot accept it without conceding the entire strategic rationale for the war in the first place. So the strait remains the centerpiece of this conflict. America must keep it open to justify the war effort. Iran must keep it closed to justify its survival strategy. And neither side has a clean path to resolution. Operation Epic Fury has introduced something the world has never seen on a battlefield at this scale: AI-driven targeting integrated into live combat operations. Admiral Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander overseeing the campaign, described how American forces are using advanced AI systems to process massive streams of intelligence data in seconds, allowing commanders to make faster decisions about targeting. Meanwhile, the U.S. Space Force has been operating in the background, degrading Iran's ability to use satellite data while simultaneously protecting positioning information for American troops across the Gulf. On paper, this is a technological edge that should be decisive. And in the early weeks, it was. Over 5,500 Iranian targets struck with precision. Iranian drone and missile launch rates significantly dropped in the first 2 weeks. Entire classes of warships eliminated at their moorings. The numbers suggest a military operation running exactly as designed. But here is the catch. Iran has been adapting. Analysts tracking the conflict have noted that Tehran is using Russian and Chinese satellite imagery, direct intelligence support from America's two greatest rivals, to assess bomb damage and recalibrate its strikes on a daily basis. Technology wins battles. It does not necessarily win wars when the enemy refuses to fight the kind of war your technology was built to defeat. Iran is not trying to match American air power. It is trying to outlast American political will, and those are two completely different contests. Here is the detail that should concern every American watching this conflict. As of March 23, 2026, senior U.S. military officials had submitted what they are calling maximum optionality plans to the White House. The 82nd Airborne Division is on standby. Thousands of Marines are prepared for potential ground operations. Pentagon planners have reportedly drafted scenarios covering everything from seizing Iran's Karg Island oil hub to managing the detention of Revolutionary Guard personnel. Trump has publicly insisted this is an excursion, a limited operation nearly complete. But the Pentagon is preparing for an occupation. Those two things cannot both be true simultaneously. The reason this matters is that ground wars in the Middle East have a history of outlasting every political promise made at their outset. The initial invasion of Iraq took 3 weeks. The occupation lasted nearly a decade. Afghanistan was declared a quick victory in 2001, and American troops were still there 20 years later. When you put boots on the ground in a country of 80 million people that has been preparing for exactly this moment for over 40 years, the timeline written in Washington becomes meaningless. To truly understand why this war is happening right now, you have to zoom out further than the Middle East. You have to look at what geographers call the heartland, the interior of Eurasia, stretching from the Volga to Siberia, from the Himalayas to the Arctic. The original theory, developed by British geographer Halford Mackinder over a century ago, held that whoever controls the heartland controls the world island of Eurasia and Africa, and whoever controls that commands the world. America's entire global strategy for the past 100 years has been built around one idea: prevent the heartland from unifying against the maritime powers of the West. That is why America fought in both world wars. That is why America fought the Cold War, and that is why America is fighting right now. Iran was the keystone. Iran sits at the intersection of Russia to the north, Central Asia to the east, and the oil-rich Gulf to the south. And Iran aligned with Russia and China is a bridge, a land corridor connecting Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative to the Persian Gulf without ever needing to pass through American-controlled sea lanes. BRICS has been expanding. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Iran was formally joining, with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Ethiopia in discussions. If that process had continued uninterrupted, the economic gravity of the heartland would have started pulling even America's closest allies eastward. While American bombers flew sorties and Iranian missiles lit up Gulf skies, diplomats were attempting to find an off-ramp. Trump announced publicly that Iranian leaders were eager to make a deal, but feared backlash from their own population if they said so openly. He threatened severe consequences if no agreement materialized. The White House confirmed the posture was part deliberate ambiguity, making Iran believe America was willing and able to escalate further. Iran's response was to call Trump deceitful and deny that any talks were even taking place. When the U.S. presented a 15-point peace plan, Tehran rejected it outright. Iran also stated that any ceasefire agreement must include an end to the parallel war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, adding a condition that Washington and Tel Aviv have no intention of meeting. Meanwhile, Arab and Muslim foreign ministers convened an emergency session in Riyadh specifically to formulate a unified response to Iranian strikes on Gulf states. The alignment is shifting daily. Countries that were neutral are being forced to choose. Countries that were cooperating with Iran are reconsidering. And every recalculation adds another layer of complexity to an already impossible diplomatic puzzle. Trump postponed strikes on Iranian power plants, a potential humanitarian catastrophe, and framed it as a negotiating gesture. Whether that pause holds or collapses depends on whether anyone in this conflict actually wants an agreement, or whether they all want the war to continue just a little longer for their own reasons. Here is where all four strategies converge into one terrifying conclusion. The United States entered this conflict believing it could replicate the speed of Desert Storm: quick, decisive, technologically overwhelming. But Iran is not Iraq in 1991. It is a nation of 80 million people that has had 4 decades to study American warfare and develop countermeasures specifically designed to negate American advantages. It has proxy networks across Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. It has missiles capable of reaching every American base in the region, and it has already used them, striking U.S. facilities in the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain. Israel is watching closely and coordinating its own parallel operations, using this moment to degrade capabilities and reshape borders while Washington has no bandwidth to object. Saudi Arabia is opening its air bases to American bombers while simultaneously talking to Iran about protecting Gulf oil infrastructure. Russia and China are providing Iran with satellite intelligence to help it survive. And the BRICS coalition watches from the sidelines, calculating whether this is the moment the dollar-based world order begins to crack. Every player has something to gain from the conflict continuing. Nobody with real power has a genuine incentive to end it quickly. The trap was always this: convince America to start a war that everyone else benefits from prolonging. And now that the first bomb has fallen, the choice of when to stop belongs not to Washington alone, but to a board full of players who all want different things at America's expense. The most dangerous phase of this conflict has not even begun yet, and the decisions being made in the next 30 days will echo for decades. If you want to understand what comes next, what happens when the air campaign ends, what a ground invasion actually looks like, and who really walks away from all of this with power, that is the next chapter, and it is one you will not want to miss.